Alright folks, let me first show you what I'm talking about so you can follow me in the second part of this video. This here on the right is the metal pressure washer and the felt drag disc from Shimano Sahara, the $80 Shimano Sahara. This is the pressure washer and the drag disc of the $220 Shimano Vanfort. It's also exactly the same drag disc and pressure washer from the old Shimano CI4 Plus. And this here to the left is the pressure washer and the drag disc, which is not felt but carbon, from Shimano Complex XR and Shimano Soare XR, and both of these reels cost $270 or $280, and the exact prices will fluctuate depending on the price of the yen. Now notice that the outer diameter of all of these circles, metal or the felt, is the same, but the inner diameter, the diameter of the holes, is different everywhere. Now let me ask you this: in which case are you gonna have the most contact surface between the felt washer and the metal pressure washer? In which case? It's very obvious that if you put them on top of each other, you're gonna have by far the most contact surface between the felt washer and the pressure washer in the Shimano Sahara. Then on second place, it's not even close, because the circle here, the inner circle, is much larger. Look at the difference. On second place, it will be the Shimano Vanfort. Now notice that even the pressure washer looks like a hat. So only this lower part of the pressure washer, from here to here, only this part makes contact with the felt, okay? This part of the hat. So if you look at it like this, that's where they make contact, okay? Not the entire. In other words, even if I put this metal pressure washer on top of the Sahara felt, you're still not gonna have the same contact surface, because the metal pressure washer has less contact surface than the Sahara pressure washer, okay? And then on the last place is the Complex XR and the Soare XR. And I know this here is a carbon. We're gonna discuss the carbon in a minute, but let's assume that this is an actual felt, this is the actual Shimano felt replacement for this carbon. Hedgehog sells this. If you want to replace this carbon disc with felt, you would need this exact felt disc. But now look at how much smaller. Again, both the felt disc is smaller than the Vanfort. Look, you have less contact surface here than here. But the hat, the pressure washer, look how much smaller is again the contact surface on the metal pressure washer. In other words, again, even if you put this metal pressure washer on top of the Vanfort felt, you are still not gonna get the same contact surface as in the Vanfort. So you will always, due to the inferior metal pressure washer, you're always going to have less contact surface in the Complex XR and the Soare XR. But that's not everything, because this here scenario is not bad enough for Shimano. What they did is, instead of felt, they put carbon, and not any carbon, but carbon with a very rough texture. Now think about it. Which will make more contact with the metal washer? The carbon or the felt? Well, the felt, because it's so soft, will make contact with the metal washer almost over the entire surface of the felt. Like 98% of the surface of the felt will make contact with the metal washer. The carbon, because the texture is so rough and because the carbon is so rigid, will make, I don't know, maybe only 20 or 30% of the surface of the carbon is actually touching the metal washer. For that reason, if everything else was the same on these three reels, the best and most consistent drag performance for certain would be on the Shimano Sahara. The second best, but still pretty close to perfect, would be on the Vanfort. And then on the Complex XR and the Soare XR, the performance would be absolutely shitty and inconsistent. It would be sticky at first when you just pull the line with very little force. It would be sticky and it would not pay line. And when you reach a certain threshold, all of a sudden it starts surging and surging and surging. And people who have used nice reels for the last 5 years are left absolutely shocked by how shitty and inconsistent the drag of a $280 ultralight reel can actually be. The name that Shimano gave to this shitty, inconsistent drag is high response drag. And I'm gonna tell you why they did it and why I'm so furious about it. Why did Shimano decide to ruin the drag system of these two absolutely gorgeous spinning reels, ultralight spinning reels? These actually happen to be two of my favorites just because of their price to performance ratio and on top of that, absolutely gorgeous aesthetics. Why did they ruin the drag of these two beautiful reels? Well, you know how in the fishing industry, absolutely everything is dominated by bass fishing. Why is it dominated by bass fishing? Let me go on a tangent and tell you the quick story of Slick Willie. Slick Willie's real name was Willie Sutton, and he was a famous bank robber in the 1920s and early 1930s. And he robbed a bunch of banks, and he was eventually caught and sent on trial. And during the trial, there was a famous question: Willie, why did you rob banks? And Willie told him, what do you mean, why do I rob banks? That's where the money is. What do you want me to rob? That's the question to why bass fishing dominates the entire fishing industry. That's where the money is. So one day, some bright manager on the Shimano staff got the brilliant idea to consult with some bass anglers and implement their feedback in some ultralight reels. Well, what do you think the bass anglers told him? The first thing they told the manager is, we don't want the drag to pay line when there is just a little bit of force. Because you know how bass anglers set the hook. They grab the rod with two hands and they just yank like they're trying to remove the cheek of the bass completely off its face. And you know, you've all seen bass with missing left or right cheek. That was the first feedback. I don't want the drag to pay line when there is only a little bit of force, because I want to be able to yank without the drag paying any line at all. What was the second feedback they provided? Well, these smallmouth bass, they are the most powerful fish, and when they make a run, the drag needs to pay a lot of line very quickly. This is why the other requirement was the drag to be surging. This surging was not an undesired consequence. It was actually the goal. They wanted the drag to be surging. So it's sticky at first, sticky, doesn't pay line. And then once you reach a threshold, it just pays line like you have no drag washer at all. This was all by design to satisfy the requirements of the bass anglers. Asking bass anglers for feedback on ultralight reels was a dumb idea, and if you start a project with a dumb idea, nothing good will come out of this project, even if you approach it with the best intentions and even if you involve the best people in this project. I'm sure the bass anglers that they consulted are incredible anglers, and I'm sure they have won many tournaments and have much higher expertise than me. But their perceptions for force, for friction, for power, their perceptions are just totally different than and inapplicable to the world of ultralight fishing. It's like me doing maintenance on these reels, and instead of using a screwdriver that looks like this, I use like a mallet and a hammer and a chisel. I mean, it's just, these tools are designed for something else. Here is how a good drag sounds when a fish is pulling and making a couple of runs. Even when the fish is not pulling a lot, the drag is still just slowly slipping and telling you that it's ready to pay line. And because at all points there is some kind of slip, the people next to you on the boat can tell exactly how the fish is pulling. The people who are watching your video on YouTube can tell just by the audio exactly what's going on with the fish fight. They can tell exactly how much the fish is pulling. Now here is how the exact same fight with the exact same fish, the same runs, sounds with these two reels. First of all, sticking. Then all of a sudden, stick again, stick again, stick again, stick again, stick again, stick again, and it's already too tired, and one more, and stick again, and that's the whole fight. I mean, what can you tell about it? How is that a consistent drag? It satisfies perfectly the requests of the bass anglers, but sounds like total shit. Now, bass anglers have the full right to protest here and say, Victor, I get your point, but that's just your personal preference. It may be shitty to you, but I prefer it that way. I want to be able to yank and set the hook without the line slipping, and I want, when this powerful bass pulls, to pay a lot of line at once. Who are you to say that your preferences should dominate mine? It hurts me to admit it, but such a protest from the bass anglers would be 100% legitimate. But in that case, the right thing for Shimano to do would be to clearly designate on the box of these two reels and on their website that these two reels have shitty drag. It should be with big red letters, attention, attention, these two reels have shitty drag, do not buy unless you're a bass angler. Okay, now let's look at Shimano's website and see if Shimano is clearly telling their customers that these two reels have shitty drag. First of all, here is, at least I'll give them that, here is their definition of high response drag. Do not confuse this with rapid fire drag, this is something else. What I'm talking about in this whole video is high response drag. It says a drag with good response to the speed change of the fish during the fight. A special drag mechanism is used, perfect for smallmouth bass, which suddenly increases their fight speed near the boat, for example. Prevents thread breakage during fighting. Oh, that sounds so nice, doesn't it? What a beautiful way to say that the reel has shitty drag. But okay, remember, this is called high response drag, not to be confused with a rapid fire drag. Rapid fire drag means that you can tighten the drag very quickly with just a few degrees turn of the knob on the spool. As you can read, this is something very different. It's also not to be confused with, rigid support drag. It doesn't even make sense, but rigid support drag is the fact that the spool is mounted on bearings on top and on the bottom. Now, rigid doesn't make sense because putting bearings instead of polyurethane bushings does not increase rigidity. If anything, bearings have a small amount of free play that the bushings don't. I know what they're trying to do, but rigid is just the wrong word. But anyway, rigid support drag means that it has two bearings. Now let's go all the way up and see the designations for Shimano Complex XR, and they're almost the same for the Soare XR. Now look at all of these warnings here, or advertisements, or whatever you want to say. Does it say anywhere high response drag? Read all of them. Hagani gear, micro module, X-ship, silent drive, rotor, X-protect, free body, spool, log, CF4 plus. None of these have anything to do with drag. Now this is a rigid support drag, but again, this says that it has two bearings. And it has a rapid fire drag in some models, which again says that the spool can be tightened very quickly. Nowhere does it say high response drag. How is a customer supposed to know that this reel has shitty drag? If you're gonna put shitty drag in these two reels, I want a big, large icon here that should be red in color, and it should say shitty drag. Even better, attention, attention, shitty drag. Beware of shitty drag. Victor, buddy, what is the big deal? Just buy a cheap felt washer and replace it and move on. It is a big deal, and I'll tell you why. And there is two reasons why it is a big deal. First of all, retrofitting the drag of these reels down to the level of a Vanfort is very difficult, and for most people will end up being impossible or too expensive. This carbon washer that you see here is thicker than the felt washer. They may look almost the same to you, but it is thicker, and the felt washer will compress under pressure. So to get the same thickness, first of all, you will need two felt washers on top of each other, and when you compress them, you will roughly get the thickness of the carbon washer. Otherwise, if you put only one, you're gonna need to tighten the knob on the spool even further, and this leads to other complications. But then, even if you put two felt washers, remember, you are still left with a smaller metal pressure plate on top of them compared to the pressure plate of the Vanfort. So you can put felt washer here. The felt washer will be smaller than the felt washer in the Vanfort, and the metal plate on top is still smaller. It's still not enough. But you know, the bigger problem with this shitty drag is it's not that it's difficult to retrofit this down to the level of cheaper but superior performance of the Vanford. That will cost you money and it will still be difficult. But the bigger problem is that if you don't protest, that will happen again. This is what I want to prevent. I don't want the future generations of these gorgeous reels to have shitty drag again, or some other brilliant idea that came from the bass fishing community. Let's all agree that the bass fishing community gets enough attention. It's all about them, all of the reels, all of the rods, all of the lures, the way DNR is managing these lakes. They don't manage them for bluegill and crappie. Bass is always the most important. Let's all agree the bass anglers get enough attention. For the love of God, leave these beautiful ultralight reels alone. No more of this funny business. If you want to make some special drag or other, amazing feature to make the bass anglers happy, put it in the 2500 size, 3000 size, 4000. If bass anglers need that kind of power, but leave these beautiful ultralight reels alone.